Welcome back then to part 4 now of our dinosaur animation series. Up until now we've, done an awful lot of work, of course, in the previous videos, getting our guy, moving around and looking alive and giving him some intention and motivation and all of that, and of course giving him this tasty little morsel of food to come and snack on. But we are going to take him further again still, so let's take a look at all of that. Hopefully at this point you won't mind a little bit of fast forwarding on my part here. As you see, I've come and animated him, performing some actions here with his little carcass feast, which is, all playing nicely and working out very nice. Reason for fast forwarding? Well, for starters, it's largely just tedious action here. What we're doing is taking a couple of key moves, and because they're quite, specific, he's doing a little sniff or something, a little taste, and then a little scratch to maybe scratch, I don't know, some cover skin away before having a little chomp on this thing. Because of that, I mean, it's not, a lot of keyframes, it's not a lot of poses, but getting the timings just right, so as he takes the right amount of time to sniff, to scratch and so forth, means just setting your keys and then just playing back and nudging things forward in time, backwards in time, putting a little in between here. It's largely tedious work and none too dissimilar to what we've, been doing an awful lot of already. To, of course, go through and include all of it would just add more and more time to this project, which, of course, is already getting to be quite a bit. So hopefully you won't mind that I've just done this on the side. You should, of course, have a go yourself, have him, if you are, of course, following along, have him do some little thing now that he's discovered his food source. But what I will do is just point out some of the specific mechanics that are interesting to take note of with this move that we've got keyed in here. So, of course, we've got him, wandering up to the carcass as we saw, and he bends down like this. He has a initial little sniff, a little hold, of course, and then he moves sideways. We can view this here more easily from the top view, of course. We see that he moves and sort of sniffs that bit of it, and of course you see we get this tail action to keep him alive, and also just a slight little shift there on the main root item as he moves his whole body around. So a couple of little sniffs there with the tail acting as the countermeasure, and you also notice that we're pushing his body, just on the fore and back ever so slightly there to prevent him from needing to overextend his neck. We just move his main root back a tiny amount. That helps keep the whole body alive. You don't want to animate just the head and neck. This movement does need to act throughout the whole body. Then, of course, we have this sort of slow, taking account of what to do, and then we go into the little scratch, maybe scratching back a bit of something so as he can get a bite. Notice, of course, as we lean forward, we start with the body here. Well, actually, we start with the arm because, of course, the arm does this little recoil, of course, an anticipatory move there. It comes up before reaching out. And just as it's in the midst of that recoil is when we start pushing the main root. And you see that the main root, of course, comes forward. He leans his body forward like that so as he can reach with his arm. And notice the counter move that we've got taking place on the head and neck and the tail there, and how we're lifting his spine up. Again, keeping him in balance. He doesn't need to move his feet. The balance action is coming through from the head, neck and tail. Also, we look at him from the front angle here. Of course, notice that we're turning his head to the side when he does this. Now, of course, we've just got a very basic geometry for our character here, but let's imagine that we had, a proper character mesh on the go. Theropod dinosaurs like this, they're carnivorous, they're predatory, we suppose at least, but their eyes are often not, in fact always not, pointing directly forwards like most predators, like cats, dogs or ourselves. They're usually mounted on the side of the head. Very often, of course, they're, they can see a little bit forward and to the side, so they're sort of at a three-quarter position. Either way, such an animal would have, you know, a big blind spot where his nose is. He wouldn't be able to see things right in front of his face. At a distance, certainly he could see things in front of himself, but close up he wouldn't be able to. So these first moves that we've got here really are more like sniffs or licks or something, a little taste. But here, where he's having to see what he's doing, we tip the head to the side so as he can actually see what he's acting on. Again, sometimes you'll see birds do this, birds of prey. Obviously not with arms, scratching away at things, but when a bird of prey captures something and it's sort of, you know, working at it with its feet on the ground, it will often tip its head to the side so as it can see what it's doing, maintain a little bit of hand-eye or foot-eye coordination there. So we bring that in, so that gives a nice little touch, again adding more life and realism to the character. And then having made his little scrape, he sort of, you know, it stands there inspecting it for a brief moment. So again, there's this little hold, and then, you know, whoomph, down he comes, and we get again an overlapping action. So we have this sort of wave motion going on, you see, coming through the neck and the head, the tail of course counteracting, and we move the whole body, so he's not just using his neck muscles to rip into the flesh here, he's, you know, using the entirety of his self, getting some weight and movement behind it there. And of course taking, you know, first one bite and then, you know, little chomp or swallow and then into another bite and back up again. So that gives us the entirety of this little section here where he comes in, has his little sniff, his little scratch, you know, inspects what he's doing, and there we go. Nice little overlapping action again. You see this wave action propagating up and down the spine, through the tail, and of course into the root item here to move and shift the whole body around. And we can see it from the different angles, of course. We see that it does produce this, you know, very nice overall motion where we have got decent level of balance and everything else taking place on the body, making sure that we keep all of that as it should be. So presuming we've got to this stage, or, you know, something similar, him having a little bit of a feast on his discovered carcass here, then what shall we do with him next? Obviously we've got him taking the 2 bites, and then he's starting to rear up, potentially for a 3rd bite or something. But what I'm going to do with our fella here is something else. I'm going to go back to what we had before, where he was taking a startled look to his side, and I'm going to repeat that action. So he has of course come back up here. You can see that that's pretty much locked off there at 493. And what we're going to do with him is take the spine first of all, and over, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames, we're going to spin it sideways like this, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a twist off like that. On the neck I'm going to keep the same timing, so that's going to come here like this, and also the head, which I'm going to bring round in this way. So there we see a pretty swift turn like that. We're also going to start raising him up, so he's going to be, you know, coming alert and to attention, as it were. So up he goes, and let's counter twist that neck like this and get the head here twisted. And what we'll do is we'll put in an in-between to really lead with that head. Keep the neck pressed down ever so slightly at that point, so it sort of whips under and up. And we'll bring up the head here, turn it around, twist it like this. He's there, and very swiftly into this pose. Okay. We'll also react his body, and that'll come just a frame or so after. We can potentially just move that frame out by 2 like that. What we're going to do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's still quite a swift move for the upper body. We're going to twist it a fair bit, and we're also going to push it sideways like that. Now that of course is not best for his hip rotation that we've spoken about, so what I'm also going to do, so as of course his actual hip joints aren't having to rotate, is I'm going to turn his body like this, you see. So of course then the hip sockets are remaining square, even though he's shifting like this. And by the time we come to this point, we've got the neck, of course, countering in like this, so he's still there, and the head looking right up like this. Give it a twist that away. What we'll also do with his body here, with his, his main root null, is we'll bring it down. So as his, do we want it down? Let's see. Yes, we want it slightly down. So as his neck and head are coming up, he's dropping his body. You see that motion there? It's sort of a double overlap. One goes left, the other goes right. One goes up, the other goes down. So you've got this doubling over, underlap, overlap sort of action. Now that of course is throwing him very much off balance, so what we need to do is have his tail account for that, and we'll allow his tail just to anticipate the movement in his body slightly. So we'll key it there at 494, that's still after the neck moves. So there's our extreme pose for the body, so let's push his tail right over like this, and we'll again just do a small such movement there, and go to frame 3. We'll bring it back up again in this sort of, alert posture. And let's have a look at how that is playing so far. So chomp, oop, quite a quick whip round there. Looks very fast, but that is largely what I'm wanting. I'm going to add an in-between here for my body movement at this point. Quite simply, as it starts to come across here, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 frames. It's an 8-frame move, so this is just a little less than halfway. I'm going to bring it back ever so slightly on X, so it hasn't moved that much on its X, but I'm going to put it further down on its Y, so he comes down and across like that. We get this sort of a movement happening, this drop before the push, as it were. Again, you see it from that perspective there. Why? Well, I mean, think about it. When you're startled, when you're, taken by fright, you sort of, you often will go into, and I say you, of course, many creatures. It's a very common reaction that you see, and a good one to play into both human characters and creatures. You sort of go into this almost fighting stance. Your first instinct is to drop your hips, so you've got your knees bent. You've got a better balanced stance in your legs, and you're also sort of getting the spring ready in case you need to jump or something of that nature. So let's just see that play. There we go. Good. I think actually the body movement, although it's okay, it might actually be a bit slow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the keys. I also want the ones for the tail because they were keyed in time with the body in this instance, and I'm going to get both of those, bring that down 1, so my first in between is only 2 frames there, but then I'm going to get that and bring it in another 1 there, so that should speed it up. In fact, well, it will obviously speed it up. Thing is, will it be too rough? I don't think it is. I think it's actually pretty good. But now we're sort of overshooting there on the neck, so let's see exactly what was going on here with the head and neck. We can possibly do away, we'll just grab that head and neck frame, and again we'll also bring that into line with the body action there. Okay, that looks a bit better because that's taken out the little click that we had, which was just a bad overlap, if you will. So there we go. It's very sharp, very swift. This guy's clearly, taking a fright of something. And so being so startled, he is going to need to move his feet. He can't easily correct from this position. And so in order to stay upright, these feet are going to have to move. So what we'll do is we'll come in 3 frames there. That's just after the drop on the body. We'll key this foot at that point and come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say. And we're going to bring it sideways like this out to somewhere here. Now obviously that's starting to violate what we said about the hips, but don't worry, because what we will do, of course, is this is after the last frame of the root mover there, so as we animate it to this point, we'll work its tip again to keep that nice and restricted. What we'll also do is put a bit of turn on this foot because he's going to be wanting to turn his body around there. And we'll also, I think, bring it back slightly, just away here, something like that. Let's see how that looks. They're quite swift. Just look at it moving. That's a reasonable timing, I think. It's good enough for now. We can certainly play with it if we're wanting to. I'm going to take the toe, key it one frame after the foot lands, and we'll just pop in a very swift 1, 2, 3 little lift of the toe action there, and we'll hold it up until 2 before it comes down again, like this. Then what we'll also do is create keys for the knee pointer, so of course we can work that in as well. So there we are, we'll pull that knee right up like that, so he's really jerking his leg, and we'll keep it quite high by this point as well, so we'll keep it there, so we get that little step to catch himself as he's coming sideways like this. What we'll also do is, as the toe there starts to touch down, so this is a very swift move, is we'll key the other foot goal and go 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 3, make it quite swift, and begin to rotate it as well around like this, so he's spinning essentially on the ball of his foot and getting ready to move that like this. So let's just see this in playback so we can get a rough idea of how we're looking. Okay, that's not bad. Go again. Yep, okay. Happy enough with that for the moment. I am also, however, going to put a little tween onto this foot, the one that's moving, just to lift it up as well. Not a lot. It's not like a walking step. It's just a small step here. So we just get that very swift lift and plant, little stomp going on. So 6 frames later, we'll create another key for the hip and the, whole body here. At the minute, not moving the feet much, but of course one thing that we can observe as he is turning his body is even if the legs can't, flex much at the hip, the one thing that they can do is turn in their bank against the ground. Of course, you would normally have toes here, and of course those are, flexible and turnable, so we can shift the weight on his foot. So to help, make that whole hip thing fall into our expectation here, we can start, pivoting his feet this way. And what we also do is, in line with the key on the main route here, we create new keys for the head and neck, basically to keep him pointed in the same direction. So he's keeping his head pointed in the direction that it's come to look whilst he's, turning round and moving backwards here as well, because the main route, he's stepping, of course, he's making a step across, and so he starts to move back in that fashion, giving us this sort of a move there. See, step across and back into it. Well, of course, our next move will then be to round him right round and pull the other foot. I've said 6 frames, and maybe that's a little slow at this point. It's hard to say. I think it might be. We might want to, sharpen that up speed-wise a bit, but it will be easier to see once we get the entire move keyed. And if we just keep it simple with, frames on frames, so as things are more or less in line with one another, of course, that will make it easier to retime as well once we get into the full extent of the move. Of course, he is taking quite a bit of fright here, something has startled him, and he's, spinning round and clearly backing up. So it's more than just the suspicious little sound or smell that he caught earlier on. We have to wonder what it is, and there we go. Hiding in the trees all this time, it's Big Dino. In all fairness, this is probably a good thing to be scared of, and so we have to wonder, what's Big Dino after? Is he after the tasty meal that's lying on the ground, or is he after making our little fella here a tasty meal? Certainly our little fella is taken a bit by surprise, at least for the moment, so we're just going to have him back up. So another 6 frames later, I'm going to turn him right around so he's come, that full 90 degrees like this, and let's position him back. We're leaving that foot here, his left foot, on the ground, so we'll keep him positioned over that. We'll take off the bank rotation on the main route there, so that's coming square, and we will also have pivoted this foot around here, because obviously you can't twist his leg, so we're going to say that he's, turned his foot on the ground, he's sort of spun round on his ball or what have you, and we'll move him back across like that, so the leg is once again, underneath the body. However, to look at it, that sort of goes against the momentum here. He's not just moving backwards, he's moving, off that side as well. So we really do need him to come much more over here. So what we're really going to watch isn't so much the placement of the foot, it's the movement of and momentum of the body here. Let's bring him perhaps to there, so he's really stepped past, and we'll roll this foot this way as well, so again pivoting onto the toes there, if of course we had individual toes on this mesh. This foot meanwhile will have come round to do a landing. Let's just put it in a reasonable position for now. Of course we can, tweak anything of that nature afterwards, or tweak the the lift off and so forth afterwards. Let's space it off again a little more. We've got some turn on it like this to keep the leg in line with the pelvis there. We'll also be working the spine. You notice that we haven't keyed that so far, so let's just set a key there, and we'll just drop another one in at this point where the root was last keyed. So let's turn his spine this way and put a twist in it as he's turning himself around, and his body's sort of having to twist and writhe a little bit. Overshoot him like that. We'll bring the head and neck back into line to keep him looking off that same direction. You can just do that probably quite simply here from a chase view. So there we are, still having his attention focused entirely on Big Dino here. And also, of course, we had him, do a bit of a dip when he came round. So what we'll begin to do is we will begin to drop his spine like this. So at this frame I need to just counter raise the head there, and over here drop his spine like this to raise the neck. So that's really giving us this whoa, yikes sort of a pose idea coming in here. That's looking a lot better. We like that drop of the upper body. That really does help. So let's just give that a little play and see how it's looking for now. Okay, so a little bit slow in the mid-turn point there. The posing is good, that works well, but our timing is a little off. That second move, that second key, this part of it, that's going at a decent speed. I fear it's this part here that could be a little swifter. Just going to bring my timeline up so as I can focus on the important stuff. What I'll do first before I work on that is I'll just finish sort of rounding out the move in main key poses. So I'm going to stick with the 6 for now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll move his main root back like this. And now we're coming over the legs. So of course he's getting himself into that correct or more correct legs under the body position. So I'm going to put the bank on this foot back to 0 like that. I'll just use wireframe so I can actually see the foot underneath him from top view, so as I can see exactly where we are. There we go. So I keep the foot more or less just slightly offset from the midline of the body there. So that's good. This foot by now, this trailing foot here, by this point on, I kind of put its bank to 0, and I kind of moved it right back here, and of course over this way like this. Give it a little heading turn there. We will by this point have straightened out the spine there, so we've lost the twist on that, so it's basically nice and straightened out. I'll say we've brought his root down like this, so of course he's really getting into this defensive crouch by this point. In fact, he'll have started to drop into it, I'll say, there, just a little. So there we are, nice defensive crouch there. I'm going to keep the spine just a scotch lower, bring the neck sort of up to compensate. And again, look at my chase view to get him pointed in the right direction. I also need to just straighten out the spine a little bit here on its heading like that. and then I'll turn the neck back on its heading like this. There we go. Going to bring that neck right down, actually really quite low like this by this point, and really have raised up the head there. Okay, so let's see that. There he is, snap and round and retreat, sort of back stepping. So there we see our key poses, and I think that's pretty good. We get this nice shock and turn and sort of, you know, retreat in fear sort of movement going on in the body there, which I think works out quite well. Let's see it in playback. Of course, we see it in playback. Yeah, definitely too slow, so we definitely need to speed that up. So let's grab our major players here, which are of course the two leg controllers, the root, spine, head and neck, and let's start adjusting some timings here. I'm just going to reset my timeline, 520. I'm going to leave this play back whilst I tweak these timings. So let's pull that down by, let's say, 2. Let's pull this in over here also by 2. Okay, that's very fast, that second jump, so let's keep that out. 5 perhaps. Actually no, 6. 6 is good for that second part, but the 4 here is good. I think the one before it, a little shimmy before it, might need a little tweak, so let's try bringing that down by 1. Gives them a little bit of speed there. So I think that that is reasonably what I'm after here. This 506, I think I might bring all of this then back another 1. So I'm just looking at the root, of course, here, because there's a couple of slight overlap frames, so let me just check what's what and where. So yes, of course, I've got a hold frame there on that foot, so I'm going to grab that along with the others there after 506 and bring that back as well. Can maybe shift that afterwards if I need to, otherwise grab the spine, head and neck, and this has also got the 506 and onwards there, so let's bring those back by 1 as well to keep those in time, and let's see that. Okay, that's pretty good. I think that times reasonably well, but he is of course starting to slow down a tiny bit as he gets into his retreat pose there, so we do get this sense that he is sort of, you know, coming in and just sort of holding that ever so slightly. Right, I do see that this pose looks a little weird at the end here. Yeah, he's not quite centralized over his feet very well, so I am just going to nudge it that way a little bit, and I'm going to bring that foot in there just a little bit tighter and closer. I think that works better. Yeah, that's a more stable pose. Obviously no tail action at present, we haven't really worked that in much at all. We'll do that after. Let's make sure we've got everything else as it should be first, and then we'll take care of a little detail like that. What I think I'm going to do though, to give a sense of more of greater urgency, is we see the dip coming here on the spine. I'm really going to take this frame here and really drop it, so he's like whoa, and then of course rises out as he goes to take that step. Maybe not quite that high, but there we go, something like that. And that gives him that little lift over, because of course we've got a passing position in there, and I think that'll be the lift over for it, and that should work out. So let's see if that gives him a little extra pop. Yeah, it does, definitely. Yeah, see that little drop, that really says, you know, ooh, what? You know, sudden shock. He sort of drops his hip like that. Could possibly even make it more extreme. Who knows? Let's see. Does it just go a little too crazy if we really bring it down? It's always worth a look. Actually, no, I think that works out nicely, especially with the head coming up like that. You see the head sort of stays at the same level, almost or just about. You really get this idea that the body is dropping down really sharp. I think that does work quite nicely. So we'll leave that as is. So we work in just a few more frames of simple action here to have him continue backing up. Nothing special, as you can see, and he's just slowing down. And so far we've only laid in the very basic keys here for the main root and the legs, so none of the detail work is in there yet. So what we have him do is, of course, you know, he does his jump and comes back. You see he starts to slow down into this sort of wait, this moment of decision as to what he's going to do. And what he basically decides to do is he's going to run for it. So he takes this other small step back, where we can see he also begins to crouch, so we're bringing his root down just a little bit there. And what we're going to do with him is basically just have him turn and run for it. Run for his life. Best decision in this situation. So we've moved him onto the right foot at the rear there in this last step, or in this step after the hold, because that's the foot we're going to want to have him coming off of, and the reason being where we're going to plan to have him run. Obviously we could run him off in a number of directions. We could, run him off over here. Personally, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have him try and get away, and so we're going to run him off broadly in this direction over here, not completely straight away, but just take a slight angle on it there. So because of that, we've got him sunk onto the right foot at this point, so he'll turn off of that as he goes. Now, of course, notice, let's just switch to the top view, that here where we've been walking him back, we've just been walking him back nice and straight there on the world X, which seems nice and simple enough and clean. But notice I am using the world axis here. If we look at the parent axis, he is, of course, rotated, and you can see that this straight move backwards on his graph has got keys both on the X and the Z there. They're both in motion. Because, of course, we twisted him earlier, didn't we? So his actual global route is now pointing off at an angle. So we're into this dreaded cross-axis animation time. This is only a short move, so we can probably live with that just for this little bit of the sequence. So that's okay. I haven't done anything to try and bring him back square at this point. But once I get into, once I turn him and we're into the run cycle, it would be really helpful if I could get it so as his controllers were back on axis. So that means that we're going to do another little twist on the, pivot again, to try and bring him back on axis as he turns and breaks into his run. So let's get him ready to pounce off and into his run, and he's not going to, make the turn in a single go. He's going to turn quite fast, but he won't make it in a single step. So that will give us opportunity to work the slide and be able to keep it, reasonably tidy looking in the final thing. So what have we got here on this last spacing? That's just a little 7-frame step there. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where I'm going to bring him down for this final lurch, ready to do the spring and run away. So I'll hold that just for 2 frames. Again, we can look at the timings afterwards once we see how it all plays. Let's think about how we want to execute this turn. It's obviously going to be one complete turn, however many steps it goes over. And so we could begin it on the route here and then put in, a slide pivot. But then you've sort of got to try and, massage the motion so as the 2 rotations meet in the middle properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in the slide pivot straight away here. So of course I select the last slide pivot that we used, which was, this second one here. And I'm just going to throw in another one now. And we'll bring that across and we'll snap it to his foot position there. And now we'll begin the spring and rotate. So let's say just a 5-frame timing for now. Again, maybe we'll need to space it, maybe we won't, we'll see. And let's put a little turn there on the slide pivot. And let's also take a look at the angle of his global route here, so as we can, see the point where we are going to want to get him lined up to. So it's going to be more than that. So I'm going to go back to the slide pivot here. I'm going to go add another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames. And just so as I can see it, I'm going to turn it right like that. So now, okay, that's going to be the angle that he goes across there. That's not necessarily the keying I'm going to keep. I'm just sort of doing that for reference at this point in time. So we'll go back to his route here. Come along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what we're doing is we're springing him right up. So he's really pushing off with that rear leg there. And he's also coming across sideways like this as he produces that turn. Okay, so we're getting this motion now coming in. You see, we're pivoting round the foot and the route is sort of doing a little orbit. We can even create a little extra turning at the route here if we want, like that. It's again getting a sort of a double overlap between the rotations, but that is okay, that is allowable. And what we're also going to do is lean his body this way, of course, to maintain that nice straight leg like that. And also, since he is throwing his weight to the side here to try and pull himself round into a turn, then of course tipping the body like this is also going to work into that for us as well. It is very much what we want. So there we come, and spring, begin to turn, just like that. Now as we come around the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to of course where we pulled the slide pivot to, we can key his root again, and what we'll do is we'll pull it right the way round, and in fact we'll be pulling it right back to 0 degrees on heading. Sort of twisted and mangled the legs for the moment, but don't worry about that just presently. Let's look at the top position. So of course he's going out sideways there, but he's then orbiting round, so what we really need him to do is continue coming this way, and what we see is that that is definitely far too fast. So let's not worry about that, let's just delete that frame for the minute. We will keep it here at 5, but what we'll do is we'll take this slide pivot and we'll wind it back a bit so it's not so fast spun. I'm going to take it to about the halfway point between the two, so somewhere around there. Now when I grab this and turn it like that, again we've still got the lean there. What we'll have had him do by this point is begin propelling himself forwards and a little bit sideways, so that trailing leg, although we've got it turned there and still locked, it really is now at the point where it has left the ground. So he's sort of got himself slightly airborne. I know we haven't dealt with this landing leg yet, but that will be somewhat up in the air as well. So let's deal with it now so as we can begin to work all of this in. What we'll do is we'll hold it for 1, 2 frames after he starts pushing, so he gets a little push out of it as well. Obviously, of course, it is sliding, which we don't want to happen. Of course, his entire rig is rotating and sliding from the slide pivot. Yes, we could, of course, have the slide pivot starting to rotate a couple of frames later, but that means we'd have to have the slide pivot going slightly behind where the root had started acting. So again, we'd have this overlap of rotations to deal with. What is going to be easier is to just try and line this one foot itself up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to temporarily throw in a null here, bring it over, snap it to that foot's position, and then 2 frames later when that foot is keyed, take it and snap it back to the null's position there. So that keeps that foot basically locked during that movement there, you see. Little bit of a cheat, but it's easier to work out this way. What we'll also do is, of course, as he's pushing like this, we'll let this foot begin to rotate sideways like that. Then we'll come to that point where the root is up, so we'll just sort of, keep our timings in line for the minute. We can do any offsetting overlap afterwards. And we'll take this foot and we'll bring it right up and across, begin to turn it and bring it back under his body like that. So of course he's springing back off that foot. We can see that if we look at his root now from above, we see that, we're getting a decent degree of rotation there. We see, of course, that, he's pointing straight down the X here, coming to more or less 45 degrees, and then coming round to a full 90 degrees. So we've got a constant rotation of his whole body there. Okay. Obviously, it might begin to accelerate slightly here, but we can do that by adjusting this timing down from 5 to 4. Or perhaps even 3, we'll see how it plays afterwards. But at this point then, where we've got this key for the root, we will begin to bring this foot now out like this, so it's sort of readying itself to make contact. We'll have popped some more rotation on it like this. And what I also want to do really, I think, is I want to move his root more, because the movement here is very small. So we'll really be taking him forwards at this point, bringing that leg forwards in kind like that. So yeah, now we're getting more of a sense of him really popping and starting to move. That's much better. Then we're going to go just 1, 2 frames forward of this position, 1, 2, to make this foot come into contact. And what we'll do is we'll look at the path it's taking and basically just follow that path along so as it's contacting somewhere around here. will temporarily just reset its bank rotation as well, so that that's where the foot really hits the ground. Now what we'll do is place a key for this slide pivot, not at the 2 frame here, but at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again, and turn it to the point where we've got our, global route angled across the world axis the way we want it. I'm going to come back to that previous frame, go out the 1, 2, like this, key it there, then delete that frame, come back to this 2 point. So what I'm then going to do is take this slide pivot, come to the old toolbox here, add another slide pivot, snap it to now this new leading foot here, and over the course of, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames, we'll say, I'm going to rotate it from here until I get the axis of the global route there lined up across the direction that I'm going to be wanting his whole body to be aligned to. So, complicated little maneuver here to do this turn. It certainly is that, but it is less complicated than trying to animate the whole body across the axis when we're trying to make him run. So we've got to this point where he's turned on that foot. We'll come back to the top view here of the route. We'll now rotate it back so as the route is, in line with the world axis. He's made his full turn here, which is basically the same as setting the heading back to 0. And we will line it up over that foot, pushing forwards like this. We'll have given that foot some turn. As he's come round, it's sort of slid on the ground. And you see the movement that we're starting to get in. I think that perhaps this route turn is too much. He's turning too fast there. So what we'll do is we'll only have turned the route part way, again across and in like that. That's more like it. Okay, so there we see the continuance of the turn taking place, and you see that of course across that 2 frame point here the body isn't turning at all, so of course that's a hold between the 2 slide pivots, and we will need to massage the route a little bit there. We'll do that afterwards once we've got the basic timing here laid in. And then I'm going to go another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and start to extend it slightly here. So let's say 6, 7. This point the route will have fully rotated. I think he'll be pushing off like this into his run there. You see, there's the turn, the leap, turn and run. You can see it nicely from the top view here. You can also get an idea on how we want to manipulate this. I see that the route really wants to come across there. There we go. That's getting our turn. It's possibly still a bit much at this stage, so let's just roll it back slightly, push it out a bit more this way. There we go. Sequence of keys is decent. We kind of rolled the route straighter again by this point, possibly even counter-rolled it, as of course his body weight comes round. And there you see we are starting to see the beginnings of a half-decent turn, irrespective of this weird action going on between the slide pivots there. So let's get this trailing foot at some point. Let's just give it a hold key there for the time being. By this point in time, it's really lifted and come round and it's getting ready to land. Of course, because we're going into a run now, it really does have more time in flight. So let's see exactly where we want to be placing that. Somewhere out here again, quite below the body. Again, we won't worry about tweening it for the minute. And then after this, we're really into the full run cycle. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just for the sake of argument again, at this point, now we've got him at his full on-axis rotation on his route there. And we've brought him across like this. And I think at this point he's into the real leaving pose on that foot where it's really just, at full extension, propelling him forwards. And we've also started to pick up some acceleration. And you see that we're not moving quite as much sideways anymore. We have started to turn a little bit more forwards. Can perhaps still come a little bit to this side here just to carry that momentum through, and consequently just nudge that foot to this side ever so slightly for its touchdown. Let's look at it now in top view. And so there we go. There's our turn and run. And we can see that the overall posing and the arc of motion that his body takes is pretty good. See, we get this little slink to the side before a push off to the other side, of course, as he comes off his legs there. So we are overall pretty happy with how that turn is moving him through space. Obviously, the trick now, there we go, we can see it in perspective view. The trick now is really just tidying up all of this action across the turns and, of course, the timings to make it nice and smooth. Once again, we've done an awful lot of work by this point, so it's probably time for a little break, and we'll get into doing all of these extra details and, you know, smoothness to this action to finish it out in the next video.